first, I'd like to bring up Andy. Andy's the Executive Vice President of Checkouts Tracking for NPD, and he's going to talk about the millennial, and we'll go from there.
Thanks. All right, thanks. Let's see, what I am going to talk about is how you get to understand and know millennials to inform your business strategies. Okay, so let's do that. Why the focus on millennials? Well, pretty straightforward. I pulled a few quotes. The first one's from Accenture. There are roughly 80 million millennials in the US alone, and they spend about 600 billion, which is a lot. Add to that, they'll come into their own by 2020, when Accenture projects their spending in the US will grow to 1.4 trillion annually and represent 30% of total retail sales. So obviously they're worth paying attention to. But on the other hand, from a Forbes article, companies have been struggling to connect with this generation, right? Many of the traditional methods of advertising are proven ineffective. So what I'm going to take you through is a deeper dive into the millennial. Now, at least a few in the room may remember Ed Koch, former mayor of New York City, 1978 through 89. And he was known for getting out on the street and connecting with people, and he had a phrase, "How am I doing?" So a question would be, how do you guys know how you're doing with millennials? I'm going to guess most don't have a pretty clear picture of that. So a few things to consider. In addressing your understanding of millennials, their competitive factors, understanding where channels, retailers, where you're doing well and why, what types of brands are trending, and what your competitors' strategies are, right? Some basic factors. So to address this, there are many traditional ways, like retail tracking services. So positive on retail tracking services is census level accuracy, great detail. On the other hand, the retailer is not always exposed, right? There are confidentiality clauses. Sometimes there are non-participating retailers. And most important for this conversation, the unit of observation is the store, and we're going to shift it to all about the consumer. So, meet Jennifer. Jennifer's our millennial for today, and the data I'll show you on Jennifer is real. The name is masked, but we'll just call her Jennifer for today. And she lives in Houston. And if you want Jennifer to buy your products, no matter what you're selling, no matter how you're selling it, no matter where you're selling it, you need to know some things. You need to know how she spends her money, what she buys, where she shops, what brands she values, and there are a lot of places she shops. See, the animation goes. Get a sense, Jennifer goes to a lot of places, and these are all real stores Jennifer shops at. And it's going and going. Okay, we're finishing up at Pinkberry, Google Play, and Sephora. So, with all of that complexity, it's not necessarily the easiest thing to connect with Jennifer, given the number of retailers, channels, and devices she may use. So, going back to how we connect, there are a number of challenges, right? Point of sale data is great on many levels, but it can't show the person across the retailers. Credit cards are insufficient because they won't provide line item detail right in the basket or cash. Consumer surveys are helpful, but again, limited because it's hard to burden a person over a long period of time with all categories and item level detail. So, the data we're going to use today is based on the receipt. So, you may not think that much about receipts, but when you take a closer look, there's really a lot of information on a receipt. It's got store, address, date, time, method of payment, item level, couponing, discounts, and often things like loyalty programs, right? So there's lots of data on that receipt. And what we do is, so checkout, the area I'm responsible for, harvest the information off of receipts, both paper and e-receipts, to get a better view of consumer spend. So I'll just give you a 2-minute overview of checkout because it'll help you understand the data that we're going to talk about. So, launched late last year, and receipt harvesting off of 2 different sources. One is a mobile phone app called Receipt Pal that has a panel of about 50,000, and it's just growing organically very, very quickly. And we also work with a partner company called Slice to harvest over 2 million, actually it's over 2.5 million email inboxes for e-receipts. So in net, we're tracking over 30 million items per month. It's all opt-in, so we're able to expose detail at a retailer level. It enables us to know what consumers are buying by time of day, across days, weeks, and months. And the net is a very precise view of purchases by real people, broken out by their demographics, including retailers at category, brand, and item level, right? So that's how we're going to paint this picture of millennials. So get back to Jennifer, and this is a different view of her spend from December of last year through May, and she visited 97 retailers and spent 22% of her dollars at restaurants. What we also see is we take a closer look, and we know this because she's a panelist giving her receipts. We actually know that she goes to Starbucks and gets her grande iced coffee and her tall iced peach teas at $3.25. And beyond that, we know that she is a big Uber customer. Right? So we're painting not just a picture of one category spend, but her lifestyle. So we'll compare that just briefly to a boomer, and then we're going to go into some data specifically about millennials. So take, for example, a boomer who's a panelist. We see based on demographics and receipts, she's a 60-year-old female, lives in Arizona, has a dog, drinks Starbucks coffee, is Costco member, shops apparel at Walmart, and grocery at Walmart, but also at Target, right? So we're breaking down her buying preferences within individual retailers. And we can just see a clear compare and contrast to Jennifer, who we've talked about already, but if it wasn't obvious, you know, beyond being a big Uber user and visiting a variety of restaurants, she rents her movies through Redbox, shops apparel at Ross Dress for Less, and grocery shops at a couple of different outlets. So now that we've done that, you know, I've given you a view of the kind of data we can pull on individuals. I'm going to step back to some industry level stuff, but question?
Hi, I'm Dinesh from Sanders. I find that interesting. I thought that that generation would be more Netflix as opposed to Redbox.
This is one individual. So this is not necessarily aggregated up. So I could also say that, you know, not every millennial is going to spend that percentage on Uber. But I think what you'd get on that is more of what I would take away from the example of Jennifer here is the preference of how she's consuming the goods, whether it's Netflix or Redbox. It's showing a behavior versus going in and buying, you know, a DVD, let's say. But keep going. Okay, so stepping back, and what I'm going to do is start high level and then dive deep. So we're going to go through some industry spend. We're going to then go through some retail affinities, some segmentation, and break millennials down even into subcategories, and finally wind up with an example of detail at the shopping basket level of, that one will be phone accessories, which I think will be good for you guys. So stepping back, and we took a look at share of spend by industry, you know, high level, millennials compared to adults over 35. And we see an over-indexing, and a lot of this is intuitive to start, right? Baby products, video games, beauty, home textiles. But what we saw is for tech, at a high level, didn't really over-index very much. Then when we took a little closer look within technology, again, this is just indexing compared to non-millennials. So we saw while the tech spend was average, we saw a higher spend on things like cameras, mobile phones, and accessories. So from an index, the digital imaging will fit, the cameras, so the wearables were over-indexed, et cetera. And then under-indexing, as you might expect, on things like printers, inkjet cartridges, toner, and papers, right? So fairly intuitive so far. Okay, so let's move from the industry to the retail channels. First, take a look at the type of retail channel. And at a high level, what we see here is they're spending, and this is share of spend, we see that they're spending more of their dollars at specialty stores and less at your warehouse and hardware stores. So again, high level, but I do think that is pretty consistent with what we see for millennials at the specialty stores. Now, taking this to retailers specifically, and we didn't put out an exhaustive list, I'd be happy to supply more detail, but when you look at the over and under indexing, yep, Amazon pops up there, way high, as you'd expect. But you also have, for share of spend, you've got JCPenney, Best Buy, and Target, and again, kind of flipping it, the Home Depots of the world, the Sam's Clubs, way under indexing on share of spend. So a couple of added pieces of data, just kind of rounding out a holistic view of millennial spend. First, we see they're health conscious. What we actually find is they under index on things like burgers, carbonated beverages, and fries, but when they go out to eat that kind of food, they're going to In-N-Out Burger or something like that. Well, as a New Yorker, I always take an opportunity to go to In-N-Out Burger when I'm out here anyway, but it's, the brand resonates, the view of quality is important to connect with the millennial. You take that into retail, often seeking quality. Brands can be important, but price is important as well. So you see a lot of millennial shopping at places like Nordstrom and Rack. And move into from the physical to the digital, millennials spend a lot on things like in-app games. Moving into the digital purchases has been a growing trend. And we took a look at some information on the percentage of millennials' online spend they're devoting to in-app games year over year, and it is growing very, very consistently. So of that pie of online spend, more of it is going to things like in-app games, which is, I think, both an opportunity and a challenge for many. And then last is the lifestyle. And this, I think, is an important point. And it goes back to some of the conversations on devices and phones. No matter where the object or the service is fulfilled, that phone or device is part of the experience. You take the Ubers, the Grubhubs, the Airbnbs, and similar types of services, millennials are way over-indexing, and those brands are all experienced on devices to start, even though the end fulfillment may be physical. And I think that's an important point in connecting with the millennials. So let's move to retailers and channels. So setting it up, stepping back, beyond millennials, obviously some pairs and groups of retailers share more customers than others. And it's a reflection of competition, right? There's consumer choice. You don't go to the same retailer for everything. Complementarity, so one retailer may not satisfy all of your needs, and variety, right? People like to go to shop in different places. So we'd say you need the data to devise competitive strategies, determine how the product offerings, whether you're a retailer or manufacturing, should extend or not. And variety. I think this is also a point with millennials and other groups where there are branding concepts that can be adopted to reach different groups. And when Adam was talking about marketing before, I think understanding some of the nuances of the millennial lifestyle can help in those brand concepts and strategies. So, now, I was talking about some of our data, and from our panelists so far, we've encountered almost 300,000 individual merchants, like unique retailers. So what we did is we tried to put together, or we did put together, an affinity. So we said, okay, what retailers, have strong affinities from customers across them? We got this kind of colorful but messy chart, which, frankly, was not that helpful for us. So we took a different view. What we did is we looked at groups of retailers shopped by the same customers, and we created segments. So I've got a few interesting names. So first segment was Teenage Food and Funland. You can see you've got your fast food, your GameStop in there. Save a Dime. We've got our lower priced retailers. The June Cleaver of the 21st century, and a few of you in the room or more probably remember or know who June Cleaver is. If not, look up your Leave It to Beaver references online. And the hipster shopping, right? You can see we've got our Whole Foods, Starbucks, Chipotle in there. And homebound, right? More at-home work and doing things at home. But what we also found is, it's really important, not all of these segments share retailers. The customers are not sharing the retailers are not sharing buyers in all of these segments. And from the conversation earlier, if you guys are looking for new distribution opportunities, it's really important to understand the opportunities of where those consumers are shopping on a basis across retailers versus where they may not. And it's not always intuitive, but it's absolutely something that you can pinpoint. So we take those retail clusters, and now let's start to create some consumer clusters, and then we'll put them all together. So what we did is, a lot of consumer segmentation work is based on demographics. We went beyond that with the receipt data. So we identified segments based on similar preferences for brands and retailers in ways that we think could point to growth opportunities for each segment. So we did this with behavior across all categories, hundreds of retailers on and offline spend and all payment methods, and based on many, many months of receipt data. So here's what we came up with. I'll pop these up and then we'll talk about them. So we created a set of consumer segments that map across many dimensions, but I just plotted them here by age, younger to older, and affluence, more affluent to less affluent. So you'd see, and by the way, these are overall consumer segments, not millennial specific. I'll show you in a few minutes how millennials compare and fit into these segments. So on the left, we've got our fashion seekers, right? Younger, aspiring to more fashion. The more affluent is more shopper-centric. And as you'd expect, intuitively down toward the lower right with less affluence and older, making it work with less dollars. And frankly, Walmart gets its own segment because they just do. They're big enough, and everyone shops at Walmart. It would probably be interesting to see what an Amazon segment would look like, too. So here's a deeper dive into one of those segments. Our modern American shopper, right, a little bit younger, higher income, shops at our modern June Cleaver, hipster and crafty store segments. And you can see, I've listed a number of the retailers, right, from your Macy's and Targets to your Whole Foods and Trader Joe's to places like Panera Bread. Right? Highest income, relatively younger, 2/3 white, but the shopping frequency, number of receipts, average. They don't tend to shop any more than the other segments. So now let's start breaking this down by millennials, and this is where I think it becomes interesting. So we started at a high level comparing millennials to boomers, and get some expected differences, right? So we see the millennials are over-indexing on fashion seekers or modern American shoppers. Makes sense, less on the making it work and homeward bound. But then when you start to break it down further, you see some maybe not as intuitive differences. When we looked at millennials with children, larger families, they over-indexed on the Walmart segment. When we looked at lower income millennials, they over-indexed on the making it work. When we looked at older millennials, because millennials are a pretty broad age range, they over-indexed on the homeward bound. And I'll keep going with some of this, but a key point here is in your marketing and product strategies, treating millennials as one group can be misleading. It's much more effective to start breaking them down into subsegments so you can reach, really your targeted audience. So here's a view of income differences in millennial segments. The blue is lower income, the green is higher household income. And we see that the higher income millennials are more likely to be found in our modern American shopper and our homeward bound segments, where our lower income millennials are more likely to be fashion seekers or making it work. Next view is, we took a look at ethnicity. So we were comparing here Hispanic and Asian millennials, and we see that both groups are over-indexing in the fashion seeker shopping patterns. So take that one step further, and we then see that the Asian millennials are more likely to exhibit modern American shopper patterns, where the Hispanic consumers are over-indexing at the homeward bound behavior. So again, takeaway here is you've got some very powerful buying groups, and starting to break them and segment them out more to a more fine-grained level and understand their buying behaviors and the retailers they're going to and what they're consuming will lead to better strategies. Okay, so going back, I showed a few minutes ago an overall millennial breakout in tech spend, but we just did an index of millennials 18 to 24 and then 25 to 34 for tech spend, and we saw some differences. So even within millennials, you'll see that the digital imaging, wearable tech, et cetera, are over-indexing with the younger millennials, but with your older millennials, areas like home audio are over-indexing. So again, there are differences here. And what I'd also put out a hypothesis of is millennials will fit a life cycle strategy. Go back to the beginning, they're going to increase in spending behavior. So breaking it out to the 18 to 24 and 25 to 34 is just the beginning. As this group ages, you'll see the behaviors changing and tracking over time. All right, so summary of the segmentation. The big picture can be misleading. Really diving down into factors like age, number of children in household, income, and ethnicity, and putting those together in ways that fit your strategies is a really good practice that can yield good results for you. And now we're going to focus on the basket. So took a very specific use case. So we know a lot of shopping is online, and we took a look at millennial baskets when they're buying phone accessories online, okay? Online specific data. So how do millennials spend differently when a phone is in the basket? Well, what's kind of interesting is non-millennials were spending nearly double the amount of millennials for that basket when the phone was in there, but they had the same number of accessories. All right, so you can see, one basket's averaging $241, the non-millennial basket over $400, but the number of accessories was constant across. Take it a different view, unit share. So we then looked at millennial spend by price band and unit share online. And what we saw is millennials are attracted to lower priced phone cases. We saw 86+% of their online phone case purchases were under $25. So that seems to be a pretty clear message in volume, right? Units. But now if we contrast units to dollar share, here are the top brands based on dollar share, and we see then it's a different picture. And I think, from the conversation earlier today about different type of retail outlets, you can look at these brands, Otter Products, Life Proof, et cetera, and some of these are fitting in sporting lifestyle, right? So as you start to look between the different types of unit and dollar share and how millennials are buying, this can drive conclusions on new distribution opportunities, let alone product. Okay. So, from the basket overall, we think that if you're starting to look inside at a basket level, it'll definitely help with assortment and pricing, whether it's in your direct-to-consumer strategy or in bundling strategies with partners at retail and at retailers, and it'll definitely help in your marketing strategies. So, to summarize, so how are we doing with Jennifer and winning her share? Say, at a high level, don't just look at your customers, in this case millennials, consumer electronics spend. Look across retailers and channels and get a good sense of who the customer is holistically to inform your strategies. Improve your precision with segmentation, right? Segment down to the consumer group. And leverage basket insights. That combination will definitely help both your product distribution and direct-to-consumer strategies. And then one more note on Jennifer. To win a bigger share of her wallet, you might also want to offer her an Uber gift card. With that, any other questions?
So the home audio over-index of the millennials 25 to 34, I think that's your segment there. Is the home audio, is that being driven by the change wave of the wireless speaker solutions?
So I'd have to go and look at the underlying data for that, but there has been very, very clear, there is a clear connection in that, and we do get, we do see lots and lots of data on that in wireless, Sonos, et cetera. So I think as a hypothesis, that could be a driver. I would have to go back, and I'd be happy to follow up and check the data for that.
Is there a demographics that opt in to receipt reporting?
So is there demographics that opt in? So I can tell you that we have the two panels. One is off of our proprietary app, and that panel skews slightly more millennial, and we do balance to census. So we do project the data out to census. We have a big enough sample to do that. The online panel actually has skewed a little bit more male than female, which we thought was unusual, but the sample size is so large we literally cover all age ranges there from 18 up.
Yes, it seemed to me as we went through this that lifestyle and age were clearly the driving variables, and I'm trying to say what's so unique and different about this group. In 10 years, they might want to be bulk buying at Costco because they've got more kids or those kind of things. That if I'm Costco, and I've heard some conversations, Costco has an aging customer base. But the question is what's different than this group than 15 years ago when kids were interested in fashion? They still were interested in the same kind of things, and what makes it stand out?
So I completely agree that they're going to hit a life cycle. So that is absolutely the same. I think that some of the differences you'll see are the way, and a lot of it is driven by technology and devices, the way millennials like to consume goods is very different than past generations. So it's not just about online purchases, it's about interacting with brands and media on a device, and no matter where things are consumed. So, one hypothesis I would say is a single channel view of the world to connect with millennials long term would not be a good strategy. The other, which is coming up generationally, is that sort of lifestyle and brand focus, and each generation has its own, right? So theirs may shift over time, which you need to track, but you can definitely see the concept of healthy, and maybe I'll reward myself at an In-N-Out burger, right? So that kind of insight, I think, is important. But to your point, over time, and part of the data shows where they are in their lifestyle is going to drive them maybe more to a Walmart at one point than to a Target or to a Best Buy versus an Amazon. So it will shift. So thanks. If there are any other questions, I'll be around.